You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, biohacking, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere and anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your host, Dr. Justin Marchegiani, as he answers your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio. Feel free and head over to beyondwellnessradio.com where you can access our full podcast transcriptions. While you're there, you can also sign up for our thyroid and female hormone video series. This series goes into the root cause of why your hormones are out of balance. While you're there, you can also schedule a functional medicine consult with Dr. Justin, myself, where we'll dig deeper into the root cause of your health challenges. Feel free and think of sharing this podcast with at least one person. This podcast grows by people sharing it. Sharing is caring. If you can think of one person that can benefit from this information, please feel free and share it. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can also click below the video or podcast where you'll see the iTunes review button and leave us a review. You can also sign up for the newsletter at beyondwellnessradio.com where you'll get updates before anyone else. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. And we are live. It's Dr. Justin Marchegiani in the house with Dr. Bernd Friedlander. Dr. Bernd, it's really excited to have you on the show today. What's going on?
Oh, I'm just excited to be with you, like always.
Well, I'm really excited here too. So let's dive in. I mean, you've been in this field for 40 plus years clinically. You're functional medicine, also chiro doc. You've been in the supplement industry for a while. You work with athletes, you work with the everyday population, and you have a lot of experience on a lot of different topics. So I wanted to pick your brain here. One of the first topics I wanted to dive into is longevity. A lot of people are interested in improving the amount of years they're going to live, but also the quality in their years, energy, focus, cognitive function. What are some of the first steps that you see clinically that have really moved the needle in that department?
Well, I think a lot of it is, we're looking at environmental factors, and what dictates our lifestyle is going back 65,000 years ago when we were outdoors and we had no computers, no cell phones, no technology, no EMR. So I think that is another problem we're seeing today, because I think today the youth of, what we're seeing is indoors. They're indoors and working indoors, and computers and cell phones and video games. So they're changing the quality of their life, but also it's affecting their brain, the chemistry of the brain. And, depression, anxiety disorders is very high now, as you know. And I see a lot of that. And the other thing is everybody doesn't understand what's the right diet. They all think, they go in veganism, they go in high protein, diets, low carb diets. A lot of it is activity also. What do you do on a daily basis that dictates what you eat? But one thing I tell everybody in the morning is get a little sunlight in your eyes so you start activating all those important neurotransmitters that the brain needs, the mitochondria needs. And I always say have a good protein drink in the morning or a protein meal. And that means over easy eggs or soft-boiled eggs, and it's got to be pasteurized. And I use ghee butter to get my day going, and I take about 30 grams of collagen every single morning. And that's pretty much my diet. And that sustains me to go through many hours throughout the day without really getting fatigued mentally and physically, and I don't really want to eat much. So that's sort of like what we call intermittent fasting, and that's the other big thing is, is the quality of food versus what people eat, and that's important. Calories in, calories out, but what type of calories are we consuming today?
So that's really interesting. So I always tell my patients, especially ones that have metabolic issues, adrenal issues, or thyroid issues, 30 grams of protein in that first 30 minutes, especially if we're having blood sugar or energy issues. Those amino acids, really, they start the day. They're going to provide building blocks for a lot of your neurotransmitters, your stress hormones, a lot of your, it's a good chunk of your hormones that are peptide based, meaning amino acid based. And I start my day with about 15 to 20 grams of my true collagen in my coffee in the morning. I do just the Kerry Goldbladder unsalted. I add a little bit of vanilla extract there. So that's interesting. You have a very similar routine. Can you talk more about collagen and intermittent fasting? So some would say having that collagen in the morning may throw you out of a fasting state. Are you technically still fasting, or at least a modified protein fast with the collagen in the morning?
Well, here, I had a chance to meet Dr. Anne Marie Querbel out of Einstein University, who's done a lot of work in the intermittent fasting scene. And the work I was looking at and working with was autophagy. Autophagy is where we recycle the junk before it accumulates and causes DNA damage and mitochondrial damage. So one of the things that she discovered was if you eat, let's say 7 o'clock at night, and then don't eat another for 12 hours the next day, you are creating what's called autophagy. And that's what intermittent fasting is all about. It's creating something where the body recycles the junk and utilizes for energy rather than accumulation and damage. And that's what happens. So what I tell people is the first thing in the morning, you want to get that brain going. You want to get that body going. You want to keep IGF-1, insulin growth factors, down. You want to prevent mTOR pathways, which are all, these two pathways are the leading pathways to aging and disease and cancer and heart disease and diabetes. So the best way to do that is, yes, fast 12, 14 hours from the last meal to the next day, but have some protein. And I think the best protein is something where you consume like cheese, eggs, something that, if you like fish, but it is important that you don't go in the morning without having a good meal, because it affects the rest of the day for you and how you sleep at night. So I think collagen is important. And I think collagen there was a study that was done, and I was involved 20, 30 years ago with Knox Gelatin on a study similar to this, where you take 15 grams of collagen 3 or 4 times a day, you actually repair and regenerate tissue, cartilage, and bone much quicker, and you prevent damage from exercise. That's the key, is the damage that accumulates after exercise if we don't consume the right foods before and after.
Interesting. I know a lot of those pathways that are being hit are the mTOR pathways. I want to talk about that in a minute. So having good amounts of collagen is a great start to the day. And the thing I like about collagen is the amino acids are coming from typically connective tissue. We're not getting a lot of connective tissue. We're getting a lot more of the muscle kind of protein, which is much higher in methionine. And with some of the collagen, you're getting a lot more glycine, which is a good precursor for glutathione. It's also good tissue and building blocks for your own connective tissue, hair, skin, nails, joints, and we're kind of a muscle meat-based society, so we're getting exposed to some different compounds too.
Exactly. And the other thing about, collagen, it's very non-inflammatory. Of all the proteins on the market today, including milk and cheese and eggs and all that, there is some inflammatory mechanisms there. But when you take collagen, which are devoid of these 3 amino acids, which lead to mTOR pathways. It's the only protein that does not have the 3 amino acids that cause oxidative damage.
Can you repeat those amino acids again?
It's tryptophan, methionine, and cysteine, and they're the ones that were shown in research to have less oxidative damage.
Tryptophan, which is the precursor to 5-HTP and serotonin, melatonin.
Right.
Cysteine, which is the glutathione precursor, much higher in whey protein, and then methionine.
Methionine, yeah. Richard Miller did a lot of work in this area, and so has Ray Peat. And when I was working in the caloric restriction diet, discovered that why caloric restriction works, it's because you're eliminating these types of amino acids in your diet. You're really cutting down quite a bit of this. And so you're getting less of that, and therefore you're not causing oxidative damage or mitochondrial damage or thyroid damage. They lead to suppression of oxidation of glucose, and that's the problem. And it's well known that these amino acids can lead to mTOR pathways, which can cause abnormal cells to grow faster. Like cell cancers require the mTOR pathway, which are these amino acids, to allow them to replicate faster and grow. And
interesting. So essentially what you're saying is we want to keep the mTOR down. So if we can keep the proteins, and again, at least starting the day off this way kind of gives you that 12 to 16, maybe even 18 hours of limiting some of those aminos. Obviously, just not eating is going to decrease insulin, because anytime you have food, especially carbohydrate, a little bit of protein, very little fat, you're going to start stimulating insulin, which is going to be a growth factor. It'll increase the IGF-1. So you're saying keep the insulin IGF-1 low, try to keep the methionine, cysteine, and tryptophan down, and we can do that by using collagen in the morning, and that's also going to be keeping the mTOR down. Is that correct?
Yes, and when you also take it at night, you are suppressing these amino acids from being developed at night, which are sort of stressors. These amino acids can lead to stressing the body by increasing cortisol levels and nitric oxide and other areas of that area, where it causes mitochondrial damage, thyroid damage, and replication of cells, the immune system, especially at night. So
and is it just that we don't want too much? Because we do know there's a lot of data on, like, for instance, cysteine from whey protein having a really good impact on boosting glutathione. We know glutathione's good, but also tryptophan's very helpful. I mean, the work with Julia Ross talks about tryptophan and helping with serotonin and mood and sleep issues. So is it just the sheer amount of it? Because we know there's some beneficial effects in the literature.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of research showing that serotonin, which is also a culprit, and when it gets released from the platelets, it goes through the blood-brain barrier. It carries through the albumin into the blood-brain barrier. Actually, it causes more problems there. Serotonin leads to depression, anxiety disorders, and it's also a mechanism for Alzheimer's.
Well, are we talking the amount of it? Because we know there's a lot of studies and a lot of clinical data on using, for instance, 5-HTP and seeing lots of mood improvements. So how do you flesh that out?
It's interesting. When 5-HTP came out, it was used by a lot of patients of mine, and I gave a couple lectures, and some of the lectures at Silicon Valley at the Anti-Aging Conference in San Jose by the Forum. I asked the people in the audience. I was sort of interested in finding out about 5-HTP. I said, how many of you take 5-HTP? And half the audience raised their hands. And I said, how many of you sleep well at night? And none of the 5-HTP people really raised their hands. They weren't sleeping that great. They all answered by saying, no, I don't get a complete deep sleep. I don't get a 5, 6, 7 hours sleep. So it disrupts their sleep pattern, because serotonin is also a stressor in the body. It's not just, we need serotonin, but very little actually. And serotonin also suppresses thyroid function. And if you have a low thyroid and a high serotonin levels, then it's a culprit to a lot of diseases, especially, Alzheimer's. And we've seen in studies where MS patients, that we've seen a lot of serotonin levels go up in the brain when they, from MS patients, done by a number of clinical studies at UCSF and also at other clinics.
So you saying with everyone, or just some people, that serotonin at a higher level is going to be a problem?
Everyone. It's known to create a lot of disturbance in the proper function of the cells. It disrupts, serotonin does disrupt mitochondria NAD levels.
I mean, I've had a lot of beneficial effects using 5-HTP with B6 with patients, though. And again, when I'm doing it, I mean, I'm fixing everything: diet, lifestyle, gut. So, I mean, I would.
You're also using a lot of collagen in your products, so
and B6 too. B6 is really important. Yep. You can give 5-HTP or a lot of these amino acids, but B6 is really that important cofactor to help with the the synthesis of a lot of these things. Plus, we know serotonin has a major role also in gut peristalsis. Gut function is really, really important as well with serotonin.
Yes. No, I mean, if you use 5-HTP correctly the way you do it, most doctors don't do it correctly. They do too high of a levels and they don't add the other things with it. And
Exactly.
that's the problem.
You need good other baseline amino acids, and you also have to figure out why the 5-HTP is low to begin with. I mean, I'll test a lot of it via organic acid. So I'll look at a lot of 5-hydroxyindoleacetate, which is a precursor to it, or it's a metabolite of it. So you can kind of get a window into it, and you have to fix the gut absorption. And a lot of people, based on their stress, they have a lot of hydrochloric acid issues, and they can't really break down their protein. What's your experience with just people having poor protein digestion?
Oh, that's very common. And you mentioned a very important thing, B6 and zinc.
Yes, zinc is very important too, yep.
Yep, and helping with digestion. Another thing also, if you're low in thyroid, you're not producing digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid as much. And if you're low in thyroid, your metabolism slows down anyway. And if you're not consuming sea salt, NaCl, which is a precursor to manufacturing your enzymes, it's necessary. Salt is really how it all started. It's the precursor to all of our hydrochloric acid and pepsin and all that. And nobody really consumes or drinks sea salt, pure 100% clean sea salt in water. And 1 teaspoon in the morning and evening seems to help people with low acids.
Yeah, any of my patients who are listening, they know I recommend a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of Redmond's real salt or a Himalayan or a Celtic salt in the morning. And in the afternoon and night, I think it's really important. And or drinking a really good quality like mineral water. I like Topo Chico. Pellegrino is also good. Voss is good, which has a lot of different minerals in there as well, which are super helpful for the building blocks of a lot of the hydrochloric acid. So I agree with that. That makes sense.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit more. What's your elevator pitch on mTOR? Like, we know we want it to go down, and we know that dropping protein down helps drop it, at least in that fasting level. But we also want to have protein, so when we eat protein, it will spike, but it's kind of more of having a period where we don't and then a period where we do. So we're kind of creating this rebound effect. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
You know, mTOR is very essential in the early stages of life because up to the age of 25, we need it. It helps to build muscles and helps to stimulate growth factors. So we need that. So that's very important. After a certain age, the mTOR pathway works differently. It starts helping accumulate other cells to grow as well. You know, abnormal cells, cancer cells, they require this pathway in order, to start stimulating their growth, and their spread is also done by mTOR pathways. So it's when you have hypoxia, HIF, it's, hypoxia, less, you don't have enough oxygen and accumulating in the cell correctly, and it's not being utilized for energy at all, but it takes a different pathway into lactic acid. So that's the problem we have when mTOR and lactic acid gets involved together. They seem to go into and stimulate more of abnormal cells. But the mTOR pathway is controlled by the types of proteins we accumulate in our body. Whey protein and milk protein and all these other proteins will lead to mTOR pathway. And one of the research done 20, 30 years ago was that if you balance it with a gelatinous food, like collagen or gelatin, anything that's gelatinous, it seems to negate these factors in these proteins. So it balances the protein. So when I was working with athletes, for instance, and they were consuming a lot of these amino acids that are tryptophan, methionine, cysteine, and the whey products, but they were also having a lot of issues with kidney problems. They were having issues with cardiovascular problems, these massive amounts of athletes. So you want to make sure that when you're doing this, you balance these amino acids. And the only way I was able to find that was in research was using gelatinous collagen. it seems to balance the negativity effects of the amino acids, and it doesn't stimulate mTOR. And I've seen it with hundreds of my cancer patients. When I added collagen to their diet, they went back and had an MRI done. Some of them still continue doing PET scans, which I don't recommend, but the MRI showed that their cancer cells stopped growing and almost went into remission.
And so regarding mTOR, insulin is going to drive up mTOR. So too much carbohydrate, too much, glucose. And we know PET scans are basically they're giving you radioactive glucose, and they're seeing where it's going because they know the cancer cells are going to take it up. So you're saying on one side, we can decrease some of the protein. The other side, we can modulate the carbohydrate in a good range. And then number two is try to get more collagen-based amino acids, which aren't going to spike the mTOR as much. And do you also say you can still kind of be more ketogenic while taking collagen too?
Absolutely, because, as you know, ketogenic diets are basically two things: high fat and high protein. And that's how you, stimulate the ketogenic factors in the body. So
There'd be some people that would say high fat, but then some people say more moderate protein just because they're trying to modulate gluconeogenesis. And some people are talking about the fact that you can increase glucose a little bit just through gluconeogenesis. So is there a percent protein that you like for a ketogenic template?
I've always say that it's, again, the amount of energy that you expire and the type of physical activity you do during the day. So if you're more of a weightlifter or more of a bicyclist or somebody, you're going to need a little more protein than somebody who's not working in exercise field as much. But you want to make sure that, we found that after age of 60, the requirement for protein is much greater at that age than any other age. So you want to make sure when you're over 60, you start consuming more protein than fats. And the problem with fats is, fats are very highly unstable, unless you eat some saturated fats, right? But there's also a minimum amount. They found that too much fats, of even saturated fats, can cause problems. So you have to know how to control that. And you got to take certain antioxidants like vitamin E to help the lipid oxidation factors of any
vitamin
fats.
C,
Yeah. So the one I found was really good is ghee butter. Ghee butter seems to give you more balance. It has a lot of antioxidants, vitamin E, beta carotene, and it's clarified. So it is a different form of fat, and it helps accumulate a fast metabolism in the body. And so does MCT oil. Using those two will help facilitate, but you don't want to take too much. You want to be in the right ranges. So I think fats are important, but don't overdo it with too much because it can cause later on with lipid oxidation, and it doesn't make a difference what form of fats, and then you have free fatty acids, which are signaling factors to aging anyway.
And then how does that affect the mitochondria? I've heard that, glucose kind of is a more dirtier fuel to kind of burn regarding oxidation, and fat's a little bit more of a cleaner fuel. I know there's a book by Christopherson called Tripping Over the Truth. It's about cancer, and he looks at cancer as being a mitochondrial issue. And he talks about fats essentially being one, you're not fueling the cancer as well, but two, you're burning a cleaner fuel source.
It's interesting with cancer because that's probably one of my more concern and interest in. I had more experience since 1980 in researching cancer as anybody else because of my father passed away. It's the Otto Warburg principle, where sugar is not the problem here. It's the utilization, the respiratory chain, the Krebs cycle, the mitochondria. The mitochondria does not use the electrons correctly. It doesn't oxidize glucose correctly. So it takes fat and protein and accumulates those into energy, and it goes into glycolysis. And instead of oxidation of glucose, which is the normal Krebs cycle pathway for everything in the mitochondria, NAD plus goes up when oxidation of glucose occurs, when electron donation is properly there. The byproduct, the pyruvic acid, is not being converted right and goes into lactic acid. So it's where if you don't supply the body enough sugar, the body goes into a different mechanism and utilizes free fatty acids in its energy cycle. And that is the problem with cancer cells. When you accumulate too much free fatty acids from protein and from fats, it utilizes it to break it down to energy, but the end component becomes lactic acid instead of CO2. And CO2 is a major mechanism for respiratory function to convert back to normal function again. And if we don't have enough CO2, and that's why high altitude people live longer and they have less diseases and mortality, because they're accumulating much more CO2 in their blood. And if we can raise that CO2 levels, that's the secret, and increase the oxidation of glucose, which is what Warburg says is the key component. And that's where NAD comes into play, and that's how it works more efficiently, by using niacinamide, because niacinamide is a precursor to NAD plus, and it also inhibits free fatty acids. And so does aspirin. Aspirin with baking soda taken together inhibits free fatty acids. So now you're converting the cells back to a normal function of respiration, where the end product becomes CO2 and water.
Right. So with our mitochondria, we have glycolysis, which happens outside the cell. And then inside the cell, that's where we start burning glucose. And then inside the cell, we start generating all this acetyl-CoA, which starts pumping the Krebs cycle. And then the goal of the Krebs cycle is we develop or we generate these reducing compounds, NADH, FADH2, and then all these hydrogens from the reduction that happens enters into the electron transport chain. And then we generate more ATP during that process, spit out a whole bunch of CO2, and the cycle continues. You want to add to that at all?
Yeah, no, you hit it right on it. And if we can continue that CO2 cycle, that's the secret. That's why breathing is important. That's why when swimmers swim, they accumulate more CO2 because of their breath holding. You know, they're holding their breath while they're doing strokes, and then they're letting out the breath. And that's a very important CO2. If you start taking baking soda, it helps with that too. And when you're drinking mineral water with CO2, you know, anything with carbon dioxide, like Pellegrino or the German one, Gerolsteiner. Those are very important because they're accumulating more CO2 in your body, and that helps.
And let's talk about some of these reducing compounds. You've talked about improving NAD, NADH. What are some of the best ways we can naturally do it, supplementally, diet-wise, lifestyle-wise?
Okay, supplemental, we know that niacinamide does that, and it's the cheapest form of improving NAD+.
How about Niagen? What are your thoughts about Niagen?
Niagen is from Chromadex. I've been using Niagen for several years now. I met the company when they started the process of utilizing milk, and they found a component in milk that goes into NR, which is the key factor. And Niagen does work very well, and some people, 100 to 250 a day seems to work very well. And I use that myself every day. So I've seen very good results from that. And also I've used methylene blue with the complex 4, helping with cytochrome oxidase enzyme, which is also a key component to NAD levels going up. And probably the best thing we have in nature, besides the foods like broccoli help with NAD, we know that beer, but there's a lot of problems with beer too, and insulin growth factors and all that, because accumulation of sugar in that body. But beer has a component in there that helps with NAD levels. Most of your fruits and vegetables are very good for that. In general, the best thing we can do is sunlight or red light. Sunlight and red light helps with stimulating NAD+. And I think if we get some sunlight in the morning from 7 to 11, and in the evening from 3 to 5 or 3 to 6, we're getting NAD function.
How do fats and proteins affect NAD? Does that help? Because we want these reducing compounds so we can grab all these hydrogens. How does that interplay?
Yeah, there's some interesting work being done where they think that fasting which I think what it does, it helps to clean the body out a little bit faster. It helps with autophagy function a little bit better. But NAD is an electron transport mechanism. So any way we can increase electron through these mechanisms of, lifestyle and avoiding, blue light, avoiding computers and television and videos, we're going to increase NAD levels. And fasting and working out, one of the best things in improving mitochondrial function and NAD is concentric workouts, where you do muscles work, where you're stimulating resistance, but you're doing it in both fashion, where you push like a push-up and then you have resistance going back. So it's called concentric workout. That has been shown to be the greatest form of exercise to increase NAD levels and mitochondria. So
interesting. So would that be more of like a super slow kind of training, where you're going slow, but then you're also resisting on the way back too? So you're not just dropping it and letting gravity give you a free ride down?
You're 100% right on that. And that's, the 10 seconds pushing any kind of resistive exercise where you count to 10 and you go down on a count of 10. And any form where you're pushing against something and somebody pushes you against the movement, you're using concentric exercise.
And what's your take on some of these bands that are out now? Some of these really thicker bands? I'm starting to like them because I'm seeing, well, number one, in this weaker place here, or, squat where you could get hurt, the tension's less, but then as you go further out, it's more. And then you also have a lot of that tension on the way back too, and it's light. What's your take on bands for some of that stimulation?
Well, I think bands utilized correctly are incredible exercise in combination with core exercise. When you do the core at the same time with the band, meaning if you're squatting a little bit and you're using your stomach muscles, that's squatting. Anytime you do a plank, you're using your core muscles.
Or some lunges. Anytime you're stabilizing your body where you could fall over, you're using that whole entire core.
If you use the whole entire core, you're getting a greater results on the body in full function, and you get greater mitochondria function, and the repair mechanism increases. Athletes, when we used to see athletes with the Raiders, Rams, and Lakers, I didn't realize until now what I was doing then, but I realized that when you do concentric exercise, you're actually decreasing the amount of tension to the joint, and because of that, you're also facilitating healing and mitochondrial function. And I think that's the key to the concentric exercises, is that you're alleviating the stress on the joints when you are coming after a surgery or having pain or any kind of thing.
So essentially with the concentric, everything's slow. So the muscle's always contracting. So if it's the chest here, and then you're coming back on here, well, now it's going to be the back muscles that are starting to shorten to stabilize on the way down. So front, concentric on the chest on the way out, and then back, it's going to be more concentric on the way back by going slow. Okay, good.
Yeah, and when you do a band workout, if you can do a band workout and you put your adductors and you're pushing out, you want to also have it somehow resistance going back in, so you're pushing. So you take your hands and, you do like push like this and then push out this way, but I'm resisting. So if you do both ways, you're resisting on both movements, and that is the best way to train a muscle.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. So regarding the Krebs cycle and NADH, is there any other, let's just re-summarize. So obviously we have niacin, we have niacinamide. You mentioned some of the vegetable compounds, right? What other compounds can we do to improve NADH? And then what about FADH too? That kind of gets ignored. Can we increase FADH2 at all, or FADH?
Yeah, we can. And, again, I think a lot of it is the quality of life, is the stress, reducing your stress value, having a positive attitude, meditation. All these are, you'd be surprised how the respiratory chain uses all this, and the mitochondria improves on all levels. One of the things is when you consume foods like, different color foods like bell peppers, yellow, green, and red, They're very important. Onions are very important. Certain fruits, like apples, have tremendous benefits in that. And if we cook our vegetables, especially our cruciferous vegetables, and don't eat them so raw, we break down the cellulose, which allows for the digestion to improve and assimilate all the nutrients in that vegetable, rather than having too much fiber and causing distension, bloating. I think also, coffee does that too. Coffee helps with mitochondria stimulation. People don't
Let's
realize
talk about that. A lot of people think coffee may not be a good thing. I mean, obviously, we overdo it and get too much caffeine, or we're a slow caffeine metabolizer. There may be a problem there. But can you talk about some of the benefits, whether it's alkaloids and also some of the mitochondrial and anti-aging benefits with coffee?
About 15, 20 years ago, I met a fellow, a free radical pathologist, antioxidant expert, and I met him at Stanford when I was working at Stanford at the SRI department. And I said, we were talking about antioxidants and free radical, and he says, the greatest antioxidant food we have today, he mentioned, was coffee.
Yeah, it's powerful.
And coffee is truly an antioxidant, has high antioxidants. But one of the important things about coffee, the caffeine is essential for stimulating blood flow and oxygen to our cells. It helps. I learned this when I was working at UCLA with the athletes. I learned it from a cell physiologist. He says, if I take coffee and I take an aspirin in the morning, it will increase my uncoupling protein mechanism, meaning I will get greater mitochondrial benefits. I will get better electron flow, better oxygen to my cells. And so I started using coffee and aspirin in the morning with the athletes. And not only did it improve their cognitive, but their exercise performance and all of that improved dramatically. So I think all of that is, coffee has magnesium. It helps with oxygen. It helps with caffeine, so you get greater flow of oxygen to the brain. It's all around probably the best, cognitive drink we have there in nature.
Excellent. And then I know with the aspirin, that's the acetic acid. There are side effects associated with that, with ulcerations and liver issues. Do you feel like the benefits outweigh some of the side effects? Is there a dose issue there? And then also, would you rather use white willow bark over just straight aspirin?
Well, I've been using aspirin for, going back since the late 80s and 90s. So I learned basically if you have an ulcer, it's going to be created by something totally different.
Probably H. pylori, maybe.
Yeah, H. pylori, or actually salt deficiency. I've used salt and vitamin E in getting rid of the severe ulcers. Yeah. The other thing is aspirin recently came out with a great paper on aspirin showing that it has one of the best mechanisms for autophagy, in increasing autophagy. So it also helps with trabecular, meaning it helps to stimulate calcium into the bone. So if you're breaking bone down, because every time we work out and we don't take enough calcium, vitamin D, we're actually using calcium as an excitatory mineral to handle stresses, all the stresses in our life. So it gets pulled out of bone. Well, aspirin helps with calcium, vitamin D in going back into the bone and keeping the bone from. It also has antioxidant components. It helps with platelet function. So it prevents platelets from sticking and clotting together. That's a big factor of aspirin. But I tell people, if they're going to take aspirin, take it with baking soda. You're getting the benefits of the buffering system, you're getting CO2 levels, and you're getting the benefits of what aspirin does without causing the disturbance or distress in the colon.
Is there any benefit just doing the whole herb that aspirin comes from, which is the white willow bark, over the straight aspirin?
I learned this from a veterinarian, actually, who was working with us in racehorses, and they buy the pure aspirin powder in potassium, magnesium, and sodium salicylates,
Yeah.
And they use that rather than white willow. And for the horses and animals, they require so much of it that they have to buy the huge bulk. So if you can get the potassium, sodium, magnesium salicylate, that's even better. And you got to go to a pet, compound or somebody that works with animals, and you can order that from them. And now you're getting greater results.
Yeah, and then what's your take on the Ray's syndrome that can happen with the aspirin? I know that can happen when you're younger. Usually there's a viral infection happening with it, and then so you really want to be careful taking aspirin if there could be a viral infection.
If it's that's something I've read and looked at research, and I have not found a true paper on that. It's the same thing with honey. They said if you take honey at a certain age, it can contribute to this problem too. Not seen enough of it, but for a child, if you're going to give aspirin, you want to make sure that child gets very low anyway, extremely under maybe 45 milligrams or less. They don't need much.
Yeah, I'll put in the chat here for you an article on aspirin and Ray's syndrome. Basically, the big thing is it's just you want to avoid giving aspirin with kids when there could be a viral infection. So in general, just trying to maybe avoid it to begin with until people are older may be a good idea. I know people are hearing a lot of the benefits. I just want to make sure they don't jump on board and give it to a kiddo just to be on the safe side there.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I think there's some benefits there. That's excellent. And then what about topically using aspirin? Can you put it in like some DMSO or some kind of a liposomal solution and rub it on the skin or the joints?
Yes, absolutely. Back in the old days, we used to use a lot of that. We used to grind the aspirin and then add a little DMSO with it, or or aloe vera, anything that helps with driving that in there, essential oils. And it's a great topical because it works. Aspirin is one of the few molecules that works on COX-1 and 2, meaning the prostaglandins 1 and 2. Every other anti-inflammatory only deals with one of them, COX-1, and that's it, not with 2. So aspirin has a greater potential of inflammatory mechanisms than anything else. And Boswellia does too. Boswellia is the only plant that works on both 1 and 2.
How about curcumin? Does that do both too, or
no?
One?
Curcumin doesn't work on both. Only Boswellia in nature. It was done by a lot of scientific studies done at the University of Florida A&M by Elizabeth Mazzio, M-A-Z-I-O.
Oh, excellent. Very good. So what other things can we do to help improve mitochondrial function or just improve longevity in general? You mentioned the aspirin, you mentioned the coffee compounds. Obviously, you like adding fat and collagen to the coffee, which I think is even better because you kind of time release any of the stimulation that you get from there, which is nice. Anything else you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think, looking at foods like pasture-raised eggs is important. We do need protein. There's no way a vegan is going to survive long-term results. Most of the people that I reviewed that lived 90 to 100 years old, and I did a paper back in the 90s or 80s at UCLA, and I found that the people I interviewed, they were outgoing, they had a positive attitude, they were in sunlight all the time, they were never indoors, they took walks, they never exercised, but they took walks, they ate really well, they had a great breakfast. All of them, I remember telling me about, there was 250 people that we interviewed that were 95 plus, and they all had a good meal with protein. They ate cleaner there because they were from different areas where everything was fresh. They could get it from organic farmers. There was no spraying at that time, so they ate everything. So anything with grass-fed beef, lamb, black cod, shrimp, white fish is much better than salmon. There's less oils in these fish, so you're not accumulating so much omega-3s. So a lot of that, and also breathing, exercise correctly, getting sunlight, and sleep. We got to get quality of sleep. And I think the most important thing is at night, get away from your computers, television. You can watch some television, but no cell phones, no, anything that has an EMR effect on you, because you need to lower the frequency of the brain from 0.5 hertz to 12 hertz a night. That's the frequency of the brain at night. And everything we work with is in gigahertz and megahertz. So we're overstimulating the cells. So I think relaxation at night, using red or orange lens glasses at night
Yep.
to keep the blue light out.
Those are blue light.
That's the secret. I think more in nature and incandescence and eating right. Eat your vegetables and fruits, cut back on your carbs, no doubt about it, your grains and your nuts. Those are the way I would do in order to live longer and, less illness. And, the thing is, we're not going to extend the lifespan like some people think to 120, 30. We're not genetically designed yet for that. That may happen when we start accumulating with stem cells and we inject stem
Right.
cells in our body. But right now, we don't want to have diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, all these things that come up now, even at young people at 40 and 50, where it used to be 70, 60s and 70s and 80s. Now it's starting to show up earlier.
Interesting. Now, you talked about red light. Are there any red light devices that you like? I know you're in sunny California, but for most people, parts of the world, it's getting pretty cold and not quite possible to get outside. What are some good red light devices, red light options this time of year?
I've discovered from Europe some light devices that I purchased for Matthew Cook, who's an MD, who's one of the premier stem cell fellows in the Bay Area in Los Gatos. And we're using these panel of lights, which produce LED red and infrared at 600 watts, and then at 45 watts and at 24 watts. So we have different watts. And I have the person and a patient just stand in front of it and look into it, and that also helps with thyroid. And if every day I use it myself over my stomach, I think that's the key, because anywhere you shine the red and infrared light, it helps to facilitate more oxygen, mitochondria function. It helps with cytochrome oxidase enzyme, which is the key enzyme, which we know is essential to all living systems in our body. All the photosynthesis occurs with cytochrome oxidase enzyme. All the NAD occurs with cytochrome oxidase enzyme, and that is found in the 600 to 800 nanometer range, and that's what we want to increase. So using it, I use it every single day, in morning and evening before I go out, and at night before I go to bed. I stimulate all my joints that I utilize the most, my stomach, and I do a little thyroid. And I treat my thyroid every day in the morning and evening.
Interesting. And you're using red light for all that. That's great.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture of the design we are working with, and I think you'll like it. It's something I just brought in about 50 to 100. I have mostly MDs using it right now because they're using it for stem cells, and they're seeing they're increasing stem cell production with it.
Excellent. So red light helps to improve stem cell production. And what's your take on stem cells in general? Obviously, there's different kinds, right? And some people are doing it topically. Some people, where they're injecting it in specific areas. Some are just doing it systemically via an IV. Some are going down to, I think Panama is the big hot spot. I think Dallas and Seattle have a couple of areas where you can get it done. What's your take on stem cells?
Well, I've been doing some stem cells on myself, mainly for an injury that I accumulated playing professional soccer and running and, training athletes for my hip. It helps. There's no doubt. Platelet-rich blood,
PRP,
from the PRP is very important. It helps to bring down inflammation. It stimulates the production of your own stem cells. There's no doubt on shoulders and knees, it works phenomenal. I've seen results where no surgery is required for the shoulder and for the knee. We're working on the hip area, and it definitely helps improve the quality of life. I think some serious diseases, neurological diseases, I think even MS and Parkinson's, I think it's got great opportunity. I think we're going to see some great results with it. There's different stem cells coming from the, different tissue, placenta, from the skin, adipose, bone marrow. Those have different functions in the body. And I think you're going to see more and more of this out there, and especially in sports. You're seeing more professional athletes gravitating towards stem cells today and less surgery.
Oh, absolutely. Because as soon as you go get surgery and you start tearing through tissue, that tissue becomes a little bit weaker. You're more prone to injury in the future. Also, just, the fact that you're talking about people that have to twitch their muscles and move at such fast levels that they lose just a couple of milliseconds off their moves. They could take them out of the professional sport level. So for sure, that totally makes sense. I see stem cells probably putting a large chunk of surgeons out of business. I just think you're not going to need surgery for the more chronic wear and tear stuff. I think you'll be able to come in there with diet, lifestyle, supplementation, and stem cells. So it'll be really interesting to see how things evolve over the next couple of decades.
Yes, I think also for ligaments and tendons, it's got greater benefits too.
And I think, the biggest issue is people are still going to use stem cells and forget all the diet things, forget all the lifestyle things, and use it as triage. I think when you combine it with the collagen, with a good diet, with good lifestyle, with the light stimulation, right? All the mitochondrial things we talked about today, I think you really have a greater chance of supercharging your healing.
Absolutely. And even the people that, the MDs that are doing stem cells, they want you on an anti-inflammatory diet, first of all, in order for this to work. They want you to accumulate, and most of these stem cell clinics, it's interesting, they are using collagen now, and they're seeing better results. They actually prep the person with collagen before they come in. And when they take their own adipose tissue or placenta, wherever they get it from, they see a better production of stem cells coming out of those people with consuming collagen prior to having stem cells.
Interesting. Yeah, really fascinating. What other things do you recommend? Is there anything else that you wanted to highlight that you think is important for the listeners to know about?
Again, I think a lot of it is the attitude, positive attitude we have every day, and look at life and help others. Don't stress yourself out. Don't have negativity, but look in the mirror every day and just say, I love myself. I love everything about me. I look great. And then start the day with, doing the right things, red light, sunlight, collagen, breathing exercise, concentric exercises. You don't need to go and do aerobic exercise like hours a day. That's oxidative damage. I think walking throughout the day is very important. Accumulating the right proteins, grass-fed, all these, things that are natural to us, and eating right. And, we don't need to consume as much. We don't need big plates. We need small food. And there's been studies that if you feed the body with small meals throughout the day, you increase the thermogenic function of the mitochondria. You're stimulating the mitochondria to burn more fuel more efficiently, and all of that, and then eliminating the stressors, like being on Wi-Fi videos, cell phones. Don't use them as much, and use more natural light at night, because darkness is the stressor to our body. That's when cortisol goes up. So we want to keep that down. So take, vitamin E and take an aspirin with baking soda at night. Take anti-inflammatories at night. That seems to work the best.
Right. I think it's the opposite. I think cortisol is dropping at night because melatonin goes up, cortisol drops, cortisol comes up in the morning and then down at night.
Yeah. But and then cortisol suppresses melatonin.
Exactly. So as melatonin goes up when you sleep, right, that's going to help with some of that repairing. That makes a lot of sense. What does your supplement regimen look like?
Again, in the morning, I start with an over-easy pasture-raised egg. And I take 30 grams of collagen with vitamin C, magnesium, and I take my NR, which is nitrogen. I take vitamin E. Not vitamin E, I take that at night, and I take a good B complex in the morning. I have to, and then that's pretty much it. And then at night, I do, again, another regimen of collagen with minerals. I make sure my calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K levels are high. So I do that at night with vitamin E, and I take every single night an aspirin. And sometimes I'll take turmeric, but not all the time.
Interesting. Very good. Excellent. Well, you've given us some great knowledge bombs here. I really appreciate it. Any last thing you want to leave with listeners?
I think, what we need to look at, I think a lot of it, I see the trend where people are starting to consume like soy milk and almond milk, which are okay. Soy milk is not good because of the estrogen and
Estrogens, right?
raising estrogen. And we haven't even spoke about how bad estrogen is. Estrogen contributes to lowering thyroid function and
Mm-hmm.
suppressing NAD. NAD molecules in our mitochondria get suppressed by estrogen. Is
Ah,
of all the hormones. That's why you need, progesterone, pregnenolone, testosterone to raise NAD levels. So keep
interesting.
estrogen down, and we need to accumulate less foods in that area. And I think a lot of the consumption, what people are doing today with these soy milk and also almond, is and keeping, very important, keep the phosphorus levels down and keep the calcium levels up. There's a gene called Glotho, Klotho, is a gene I've studied for 25 years. It's now making a tremendous regeneration of its, research on this, showing that it controls aging and diseases. And Glotho is controlled by vitamin D, vitamin K, and calcium, and keeping a good thyroid and parathyroid functioning, and consume less phosphorus foods. And your nuts are very high in phosphorus, and some of your grains are very high. So we want to accumulate more calcium in our diet. We're not getting enough calcium. People think these books out there by Tom Levy that calcium is bad. Actually, the opposite. I have worked with a fellow at Stony Brook who reversed his own cancer, pancreatic cancer, and hundreds of other people with cancer, with increasing calcium in levels that most people won't even look at.
We just have to make sure there's enough vitamin K, though, with that higher amount of calcium, right?
Yeah, we need vitamin K, and we get it from kale. If we cook the kale, the juice of the kale has a tremendous amount of vitamin K, and there's a lot of cheeses out there, like Gouda has vitamin K, and a supplement, which I take.
You'll probably get it in your ghee in the morning as well, that you mix in your coffee too, right?
Right.
And then the big sources for your calcium are obviously going to be maybe some of that cheese as well, some of the butter and ghee, and also some of your green vegetables. And if you eat any fish that have any bones in there, what else would you be getting calcium from?
Some leafy greens and things like that. But I think any dairy products have the greatest levels of calcium. There's no doubt about it. If you can handle dairy products from sheep or goat or raw milk, I think that's where you're going to get the best calcium. It's assimilated. The protein helps the calcium go in more assimilated.
Because we don't want calcium plaque forming in the artery, so that vitamin K really helps it go back into the bone. So vitamin K into the bone, parathyroid takes it out of the bone and brings it back into the bloodstream. So that vitamin K, I think, is important, and also enough magnesium along with the calcium too, because those kind of go back and forth, right?
Yes, you need both of them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Makes sense. Well, you've given us some great information here today. I really appreciate everything. Is there anything else you want to leave listeners with? I think we hit everything.
I think we hit everything. I think, I think just like I said, is start realizing that we can, Google and find a lot of information. Don't rely just on doctors or even myself. Read about what's really the chemistry of life. And that's what I did. I went back and I wanted to find out who Justin is, and who Bern is, and who Lisa is, who we are, and how this plant came about. And learning about the chemistry of life is the secret to everything that we're talking about today. It's the photosynthesis, the sunlight, the sea salt, the water, the distance of the sun and the planet Earth, and the amino acids and the sugar complex that created all life. And when I went back and studied, 200,000 years, 4 billion years ago, and 2 billion years ago, we had an organelle, a bacteria called the mitochondria. When the mitochondria started developing in the planet Earth, that's when every living system started being created. Everything from fish to animals, reptiles, to certain plants, and life itself. And how did this bacteria get here was the key. And understanding how this key and this organelle developed, I think, gave me a better view of what we need to do in ourselves to maintain that organelle. That organelle we need to maintain.
I love it, Dr. Byrne. Thank you for all the feedback and the little tidbits and advice here. Really appreciate it. Great chatting with you all. And we'll put Byrne's information down below. So if you want to reach out to him, you'll have all his information down below. Excellent. Great chat with Dr. Byrne. You have a phenomenal day. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. You're wonderful.
Thank you.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com.